friends, and welcome to Coached by Tara, the podcast where Tara
Hi, that's me.
coaches me, Mike. Hi, I'm Mike, about different things in the world, mostly story-based things, not really like how our baby's made or anything like that.
No, that'd be weird.
That would be weird. Anyway, we are starting with the Twilight series of books.
Yes.
We are on the first Twilight book. We just finished chapter 4 last week. We were on chapter 5.
Yes.
I'd like to first of all thank everybody who's been listening and watching and checking us out and reviewing us on iTunes and
sending us emails.
subscribing and sending us emails and all that stuff.
We appreciate that.
We appreciate you, and let us know how we're doing. People who voted in the poll, we're not ready to reveal the poll results yet,
Yes.
but we will.
Soon.
We'll find out who the ultimate simp is.
Yes. And also... I don't know. I don't remember what I was going to say.
All right, and also... You can email us anytime at cbterrapodcast@gmail.com. You can hit us up on Twitter at cbterrapod. And you can join our Discord, which also has a bunch of Kingdom Hearts fans from my other podcast, the Instant Report Podcast, which Tara sometimes features on.
Oh, yeah.
And, yeah.
And please share with your friends that also like Twilight or hate Twilight.
Like or hate Twilight.
Yeah.
As long as they want to experience Twilight, that's all we care about.
Right. That's truly all we care about.
Anyway... It's recap time. I'm going to recap the last chapter, which was chapter 4, Invitations.
Yes.
So...
Like lots of invitations.
Lots of invitations.
Right.
So we find out that there is a dance coming up where the girls ask the guys to the dance, kind of a traditional, unorthodox reversal of those roles that we haven't seen previously.
Sadie Hawkins dance. That's what they're called. Did you know that?
Why is it called a Sadie Hawkins dance? Who's Sadie Hawkins?
I don't know. You've never heard that term?
No.
Sadie Hawkins is when the girl asked the guy. You looked at me so incredulously.
I don't know who
I was
Sadie
just like,
Hawkins is.
Oh, should I look this up?
I think the podcast listeners have to know who Sadie Hawkins is.
I'm like, can't be the only one that knows that. Okay, here it is. I'm already ready.
All right.
In the United States and Canada, a Sadie Hawkins dance is usually an informal dance sponsored by a high school, middle school, or college in which the women invite the men. The history of this is the Sadie Hawkins dance is named after the Lil Abner comic strip character Sadie Hawkins, created by cartoonist Al Capp. In the strip, Sadie Hawkins Day fell on a given day in November. The unmarried women of Dogpatch, I'm assuming that's the town,
what the fuck is happening?
Got to chase the bachelors and marry up with the ones that they caught. The event was introduced in a daily comic strip that ran on November 15th, 1937. In 1939, Sadie Hawkins events were held at over 200 colleges. Weird. So it came from like a comic strip.
A comic strip where they would hunt the men down and then marry them if they caught them?
Yeah.
It's horrifying.
I think they're dogs. I think the Lil Abner comic strip is dogs.
Yeah, I don't know what Little Abner is either.
Let me look that up too, I guess.
Okay, while you're looking that up, I'm going to continue.
Wait, nope, I already found it.
Okay.
Oh, no, it's not dogs. It's just people.
Yeah, weird.
Okay, anyways, this was 1937,
People
though.
were weird in 1937.
Anyways, okay, moving back to this.
We find out there's a Sadie Hawkins dance coming up where the girls ask the guys, and we find out that Anna Kendrick, Jessica,
yes,
wants Mike to ask her.
Yes.
And she wants to make sure that Bella's okay with that. And Bella's like, I don't give a shit. He's a simp. Right?
Yeah, he's just like, she literally doesn't give a shit.
So then a series of unfortunate events unraveled from there. First, Mike asks Bella if she'll ask him to the Sadie Hawkins style dance.
And had told Jessica to wait.
And had told Jessica, he told Jessica to wait because he had to figure out if, he didn't tell her about Bella, but he wanted to figure out if Bella would ask him. Bella said, no, dude, you should just go with Jessica. Stop making her wait.
She told him it's rude.
It's rude. And Rob Pat took some notice
into
this because he was sitting right there because...
Rob Pat was like, LOL, look at you.
He was like, LOL, what a loser, for one. And then he finally speaks with Bella for the first time and kind of says, hey, you shouldn't want to be friends. You shouldn't be friends with me.
Yeah.
And she's just like, what the fuck does that even mean? They have an awkward thing. She drops her books. He picks them up immediately, like without even seeing him pick them up because he's a vampire, obviously. Then... outside her car after school, our good boy Chess Club Eric's there. Sweet Chess Club Eric. And he goes, hey, can you go to the dance with me? And she's like, yo, dude, this is a Sadie Hawkins dance. That's not how this works. And he's like, yeah, I know. But anyway, will you go?
But anyways, please go with me.
Like I said, will you go with me? And she's like, hey, no, dude. And she comes up with this. I forgot to say this when Mike asked her, but she came up with this thing where she's going to go to Seattle because that's how she can get out of it. Hey, I want to go to Seattle. Right. Without like hurting Mike's feelings. She was worried about hurting Mike's feelings. So she kind of tells Eric to fuck off. Right. And he walks away. And she gets in her car, and as she's about to get in her car, Edward walks by, and he's laughing because he's like, bunch of simps,
LOL,
bunch of simps.
Second one in a row.
So he gets in his car, and he starts blocking traffic for some reason while he's waiting for the rest of his siblings to get in the car. And so she's stuck behind him, and then Simp Tyler's behind her, and he gets out of his brand new car, knocks on the window, he goes, hey, are you going to ask me to the dance or what? And she's like, no, dude, I'm going to Seattle. And she goes, and he's like,
oh, I thought Mike was just saying
I thought Mike was just saying that, or you were just letting Mike down easy. And she's like, no. He goes, all right, there's always prom, and walks away. So she's like, what in the... And then she can see Edward laughing in the car in front of her through the rearview mirror. He speeds off. She goes home. Her dad's like, hey, will you go to the dance with me? And she's like, Dad, no, I don't want to go to the dance with you. No,
that's not
Charlie.
what happened.
That's fucking weird, dude. No, that's not what happened. But he asks her if she's going to the dance, and she explains, no, she's going to be in Seattle. And he's just like, all right, whatever, I'm cool with it, doesn't matter. But he's kind of worried that she's going by herself. So anyway, she goes to school the next day, and she drops her car key, and sure enough, there's Edward picking it up for her. And he says, hey, I wanted to ask you. And she's like, don't fucking ask me to dance, dude. Okay.
Too many people.
But he's like, hey, let me finish. I want to know if you wanted a ride to Seattle. And she's like, why? And he's like, I was going to go there anyway, and your car sucks. So she's kind of like, whatever, and walks away. And the last thing he says is, you really should stay away from me, Bella. Swan. And she's like, what the fuck ever. Does she actually agree to go with him? I don't remember.
No, because I mean, not necessarily. Well, let me see. Like, she's like, well, my truck works fine, but can your truck make it there on one tank of gas? He says, and she says, I don't think that's any of your business. And he says, the wasting of finite
resources.
Oh yes, everyone's
Edward,
business.
We're trying to save fossil fuels. That's what this is about. You fucking.
And she's
weirdo.
then that's why I skipped ahead. And she's like, honestly, like I can't keep up with you. So she's just like confused, you know. And he's still like, well, it'd still be prudent for you not to be my friend. So they didn't ever come to like.
They never came to a conclusion. But I'm assuming in this next.
Oh
chapter,
wait. Oh no. I'm sorry. They do.
Oh.
It says, I'm very tired of trying to stay away from you, Bella. Will you go with me to Seattle? He asks, still intense. I couldn't speak yet, so I just nodded. And then he says, but you should really still stay away from me. Bye.
See ya, class.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's chapter 4.
Chapter 5.
So I have to guess what it is. The name.
Yeah, you'll never get it. You'll never get them. I will die the day that you get it. Okay? Just count on that.
They seem to be one word.
Wait, that and then any predictions for the upcoming?
Can I learn the name first before I make predictions?
Yeah.
Because I feel like that actually gives me a chance.
Yeah, that's true. This one's called Chapter 5, Blood Type.
Okay. So, there's going to be some weird shit with blood types in this one. Presumably, Edward's going to try to find out her blood type because there's a specific blood type to him that's extra tasty. And he wants to know if she's got it or not.
Is that right?
I'm assuming she already does, and he already does know because he can smell it on her. But I think he's like trying to figure out if he's right or not. Like,
okay.
And if he should continue to pursue this cattle relationship where she's a cattle that he continues to feed on, but he doesn't ever kill her.
I like that. I like that prediction. It's very intriguing.
You're welcome.
It's really great. But
Tara, are you ready to drag me kicking and screaming into the shiny, sparkly winter wonderland? Basically, I'm asking, will you invite me?
Yes.
An invitation, if you will.
Possibly.
Because this is a Sadie Hawkins podcast. Will you invite me into the world of Twilight?
Yes, I will.
All right, we'll be right back.
Also, it's kind of not winterish anymore. It's spring. Mike,
Yes, Tara?
are you ready for your coaching session?
I am. Are you?
Yes, I'm ready now that I've subsided my laughter.
All right, chapter 5. Let's do it.
Chapter 5, blood type. So that all just happened where he's like, I'll see you in class after he's like, but you should stay away from me, but also let me, I'm going to Seattle with you. Like, so she kind of confused.
He's sending mixed signals.
For sure. So she walks into English class late and she's all flustered, blah, blah, blah. And she doesn't realize until class ends that Mike didn't sit in his seat next to her. Like, she's like, I feel a little guilty, but like weird.
So he like sat somewhere else?
Yeah.
Don't they have assigned seating?
I don't know.
I guess not in the English class, but maybe in the biology class.
Yeah.
I guess it was teacher by teacher basis when I was in school.
For sure.
Some teachers were like alphabetical.
Yeah.
And some teachers were like, wherever you sat first day, that's where you sit. And then some teachers were like, I don't really give a shit where you sit.
I don't remember what it was like in high school, but I always was so mad in college, like when you've determined that a spot is your spot and some bitch took it. Like, what the?
I always got
that
mad
got me real fired up.
because my last name starts with a B. And there was a kid who was in pretty much all my classes in middle school, and his last name started AV. So he always sat in the desk in front of me, and he smelled like shit.
I'm sorry about that.
Literally, and his ass would always be hanging out of his jeans.
Gross.
And I'd just be sitting there like,
I gotta look at this all day.
Like, I'd look down every once in a while, like, just naturally, and then there'd be his ass crack, and I could smell him, and I was just like, this is terrible.
This is awful. Ugh. Anyways, continuing. Like, he didn't sit next to her, but him and Eric met her at the door as usual, so she wasn't totally unforgiven by them. So like they still walk her to classes and stuff because they be simping. They surely be simping. Okay, so then she goes to lunch. She's like disappointed because she looks at his table and she sees that he's not there. And he's like, did he go home? And she's like, dang, now I lost my appetite. I'm just going to buy just some lemonade, I guess. She is like sulking. And then Jessica says, Edward Cullen is staring at you again. I wonder why he's sitting alone today. My head snapped up. I followed her gaze to see Edward smiling crookedly, staring at me from an empty table across the cafeteria from where he usually sat. Once he'd caught my eye, he raised one hand and motioned with his index finger for me to join him.
So he did like the, come here.
Yes, come hither.
Come here.
As I stared in disbelief, he winked. Does he mean...
so hot. Oh, fuck.
Does he mean you? Jessica asked,
winked at me
with insulting astonishment in her voice. Maybe he needs help with his biology homework, I muttered for her benefit. I'd better go see what he wants. So she goes to sit with him.
Oh my god. With her lemonade?
Yeah, with her lemonade. He goes, why don't you sit with me today? He asked, smiling. I sat down automatically, watching him with caution. He was still smiling. It was hard to believe that someone so beautiful could be real. I was afraid that he might disappear in a sudden puff of smoke and I would wake up. He seemed to be waiting for me to say something. This is different, I finally managed. Well, he paused, and then the rest of the words followed out in a rush. I decided as long as I was going to hell, I might as well do it thoroughly.
The fuck does that mean?
I waited for him to say something that made sense. The seconds ticked by. You know I don't have any idea what you mean, I eventually pointed out. I know, he smiled again and then changed the subject. I think your friends are angry with me stealing you. They'll survive, she says, as she could feel them staring. I may not give you back, though, he says with a wicked glint in his eyes. I gulped. He laughed. You looked worried. No, I said.
He's turning her into a cattle, Tara.
I know. No, I said, but ridiculously, my voice broke. I might not
give you back. That's fucking creepy. He's gonna suck the.
His eyes are glintering. Like he's just like.
Whose eyes glinter?
I mean, glint, splinter, sparkle.
Sparkly.
What am I saying? I don't know. She's like surprised. Actually, what brought all this on? I told you. I got tired of trying to stay away from you, so I'm giving up. He was still smiling, but his ochre eyes were serious. Giving up, I repeated in confusion. Yes, giving up trying to be good. I'm just going to do what I want now and let the chips fall where they may.
Oh yeah, Edward.
His smile faded as he explained, and a hard edge crept into his voice. You lost me again, Bella says. The breathtaking crooked smile reappeared. I always say too much when I'm talking to you. That's one of the problems. And she says, Don't worry, I don't understand any of it. And he says, I'm counting on that. So in plain English, are we friends now? Friends, he says, like friends, ... Or not, she says. And he says, well, we can try, I suppose, but I'm warning you now that I'm not a good friend for you. So he keeps saying the same thing.
He just has like typical abusive relationship behavior.
Kind of. It's kind of sad at the beginning.
Yeah, this is like...
It's weird.
And when you were a teen, you were like, fuck, I wish someone would talk to me like that.
I was kind of just like, it's so intriguing. You're just like, who's this bad boy guy? Like, I don't know.
He sounds so abusive.
Maybe I was into that back then. I don't know. In
2020, Edward Cullen is problematic.
Yeah, that's true. That's probably true. So she's like, you say that a lot. And he said, yes, because you're not listening to me. I'm still waiting for you to believe it. If you're smart, you'll avoid me. I think you've made your opinion on the subject of my intellect clear too, she says. Because she's like, you're making me feel dumb because I'm not staying away from you. So then she says, I should say, so as long as I'm being not smart, we'll try to be friends. And he says, that sounds about right. And he asks her, what are you thinking? I looked up into his deep gold eyes, became befuddled, and as usual, blurted out the truth. I'm trying to figure out what you are. His jaw tightened, but he kept his smile in place with some effort. Are you having any luck with that? He asked in an offhanded tone. Not too much, I admitted. He chuckled. What are your theories? I blushed.
Oh my gosh, I feel like he's talking to me.
I had been vacillating during the last month between Bruce Wayne and Peter Parker. There was no way I was going to own up to that. Won't you tell me? He asked, tilting his head to one side with a shockingly tempting smile. So he's like, won't you tell me? Please tell me. I shook my head. Too embarrassing. That's really frustrating, he complained. No. I disagreed quickly, my eyes narrowing. I can't imagine why that would be frustrating at all. Just because someone refuses to tell you what they're thinking, even if all the while they're making cryptic little remarks specifically designed to keep you up at night wondering what that could possibly mean. Now, why would that be frustrating? So she's like, what the fuck? She just goes on a rant, like, what the heck? And he's like cringing, basically. And she says, or better, say that person also did a wide range of bizarre things, from saving your life under impossible circumstances one day to treating you like a pariah the next. And he never explained any of that either, even after he promised. That also would be very non-frustrating. And he's like, you're got a temper. And she's like, I don't like double standards. So just like a lot going on.
Yeah, she's laying it on him a little bit.
I feel like this is like the longest conversation they've basically ever had.
Right.
They're staring at each other, like, they're all like glowering because they're both like kind of irritated.
Right.
And he glances over her shoulder and then he like laughs and she's like, what? And he says, your boyfriend seems to think I'm unpleasant to you. He's debating whether or not to come break up our fight. And she goes, I don't know who you're talking about, but I'm sure you're wrong anyways. I'm not. I told you most people are easy to read, except me, of course. Yes, except for you. His mood shifted suddenly. His eyes turned brooding. I wonder why that is. I had to look away from the intensity of his stare. I concentrated on unscrewing the lid of my drink. And he says, aren't you hungry? No, you? He says, no, I'm not hungry. I didn't understand his expression. It looked like he was enjoying some private joke.
Yeah, because he wants blood. That's why his eyes aren't black. Because he's not hungry.
And she says, can you do me a favor? And he says, that depends on what you want. It's not much. He waited, guarded but curious. I just wondered if you could warn me beforehand the next time you decide to ignore me for my own good, just so I'm prepared. And he's like, that sounds fair. And then he says, then can I have one answer in return? And she's like, one. And he's like, tell me one theory. Like, tell me one theory that you had about me. Basically.
I mean, I guess if I was like a secret vampire, well, I'd be way more secretive than he is.
Yeah.
Like Sean said in that last
Number one,
episode,
you'd be.
He's really terrible at keeping the secret.
Right.
But if someone was on to me, I might be like, so what do you think is going on here? You know? Because I might be into that. Like,
I feel like you'd totally be like that.
I'd be like, Do you think I'm a vampire?
Yeah, like, what do you think I am? Yeah.
Do you think I'm a werewolf? Do you think I'm Frankenstein? It's monster? Do you think I'm the creature from the Black Lagoon?
Yeah.
Do you think I'm
a Yeti?
a Yeti? I'm a Yeti.
I'm a Yeti.
shaved Yeti.
Wow.
I'm actually telling you that right now, Tara. I am a shaved Yeti.
I don't know what to think about that. I'm just picturing the Yeti in the Disney ride.
You've been dating a shaved Yeti all this time.
Weird.
You're welcome.
Moving on. He's like convincing her to tell him a theory, and he's like, he glances up from his long black lashes, his ochre eyes scorching. Please, he says. She says, well, bitten by a radioactive spider? He says, that's not very creative. She says, I'm sorry, that's all I've got. You're not even close, he teased. No spiders, nope. No radioactivity, none. Dang, I sighed. Kryptonite doesn't bother me either, he says, chuckling.
Roasted her.
You're not supposed to laugh, remember? He's like laughing at her. I'll figure it out eventually, she says. I wish you wouldn't try, he said. Because...
Okay, so you can't be like, yo, tell me what your theories are, and then be like, please stop.
I know.
You can't do both, dude.
And she's like, because... And he says, what if I'm not a superhero? What if I'm the bad guy? He smiles playfully, but his eyes were impenetrable.
Impenetrable.
I can't say it.
Impenetrable.
I said, as several things he'd hinted fell suddenly into place. I see. Do you? His face was abruptly severe, as if he were afraid that he'd accidentally said too much. You're dangerous, I guessed, my pulse quickening as I intuitively realized the truth of my own words. He was dangerous. He'd been trying to tell me that all along. He just looked at me, eyes full of some emotion I couldn't comprehend. But not bad, I whispered, shaking my head. No, I don't believe that you're bad. You're wrong. His voice was almost inaudible. So she's like, what the fuck?
Right,
what the fuck does that mean?
Yeah, that's...
Yeah. She realizes that like the lunchroom's empty and they have to go to class. And he's like, well,
they were just sitting there talking till the lunchroom emptied out?
Yeah. Then they didn't notice. And she's like, well, we're going to be late to biology. And he's like, well, I'm not going to class today. She's like, why? And he's like, it's healthy to ditch class now and then. She's like, well, I'm going. And he's like, okay, see you later. And she's like, what the she's like, her head's spinning after class, you know,
right.
Like that's a lot. Or like on her way to class, she goes to class and she realizes that in the lab today, it says the teacher comes in juggling a bunch of stuff. She realizes that they're blood typing for their lab class that day. So she's like...
And they can't find out his blood type is V for vampire.
Well, she's like freaking out because they're like doing like an example or whatever. The teacher decides to like have Mike be the demonstration on like how to do it. So like the teacher takes the prick of like blood from Mike and it's like you're like putting it on like a paper, I guess, or whatever, and then you're looking at, I don't know.
Did you do this in school?
No, I did not do this in school.
Either. This seems like...
But I've heard that is something that used to happen a lot more. Obviously, you can't just like take blood now, but...
That seems like HIV central.
Not everyone has HIV.
I know, but like what if someone did?
Right.
No.
That's true. I feel like it's definitely like a small town, like old school thing.
Like STDs, STIs.
Right. I don't know. She's like starting to sweat because she's like, this is she's not liking it. She's feeling faint about it. Basically.
You know what would have been funnier? I just thought about.
What?
If Edward would have went to class and then he was like, all right, we're doing blood types. He's like, oh, I'm out, and just walked out the class.
Peace out, y'all.
I'm not feeling well.
Right? The teacher explains that like they're doing blood typing this week because the Red Cross is having a blood drive in town like the next week, and they should all know like what their blood type is and blah blah blah. She starts to put her head down because she like feels faint.
She doesn't do well with blood.
No, she does not do well with blood.
That's not looking good for you,
And the
Bella.
teacher's like, I already know, like, he's like, are you all right? And she's like, I already know my blood type. Like, and he's like, are you feeling faint? And she's like, yeah. And so he's like, can someone take Bella to the nurse? And guess who volunteers?
Mike.
Simp
Mike. Guess what day it is? Mike. Simp day.
And so he offers to take her to the nurse. She's like, whatever you do, just keep your freaking pricked hand in your pocket, because it's making me sick.
Keep your prick away and your pricked hand, buddy.
Yeah, exactly. So then he's walking her across campus, which is around outside, like, because there's multiple buildings.
Mm-hmm.
She hears like another voice, and he's saying Bella, like calling her from across the distance. And he's like, what's wrong? Is she hurt? And Bella's eyes were shut because she's trying not to like throw up or faint or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, because she was laying down, like putting her face against the cement building, basically. And Mike's like, I think she's like fainted. I don't know what happened. She didn't even stick her finger. And Edward's like, Bella, can you hear me? And she's like, no, go away. And Mike's like, I was taking her to the nurse, but she wouldn't go any farther. And Edward's like, I'll take her. You can go back to class. No, Mike protests. I'm supposed to do it. And suddenly, she was laying on the sidewalk. My mistake. Suddenly, the sidewalk disappeared from beneath me. My eyes flew open in shock. Edward had scooped me up in his arms as easily as if I'd weighed 10 pounds instead of 110. And she's like telling her to put her down, and like Mike's like, hey, what the heck? Like, but Edward's already too fast. Like, he already walked. He's like, I got her, you know?
Simp Mike.
Simp Mike. Poor Simp Mike. Left behind.
Really? Poor Simp Mike? He's kind of a douche.
Yeah, I don't like Simp Mike. He's like, so you faint at the sight of blood? And he's like, it seemed to entertain him.
Right.
He's like laughing.
He's like, I eat blood.
And he says, and not even your own blood? And he like finally gets her to the nurse's office, and they're like laying there, and he's like, yeah, she's faint. They're blood typing. And the nurse is like, God, there's always at least one. Like, people always faint from the sight of blood, which, like, why are you hating a nurse? Like, I kind of would be the same way probably if I was blood typing.
Maybe the nurse is a vampire too.
Yeah, maybe. And then, like, the nurse says that he can go back to class, and he's like, nope, I'm supposed to stay with her. And the nurse is like, okay.
Did he say, no, I'm supposed to stay with her? Or did he say, no, I'm supposed to stay with her? And make like severe eye contact?
It says, you can go back to class now, she told him. I'm supposed to stay with her. He said this with such assured authority that even though she pursed her lips, the nurse didn't argue it any further.
Right, because he's hypnotizing her with his vampire magic. He's like, these are not the droids you're looking for.
Is that right?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, whatever.
That's definitely a thing he can do.
No, he's just charming.
No, he's not actually charming. Have you heard him talk?
Oh, okay, I'm sorry. I think he's charming.
No, he's not actually charming. He has vampire magic.
So she goes like, oh, ditching class is healthy, I guess. He said, you scared me for a minute there. I thought Newton was dragging your dead body off to bury it in the woods. And she's like, ha ha. And he said, honestly, I've seen corpses with better color. I was concerned that I might have to avenge your murder. And she says, poor Mike, I'll bet he's mad. And Edward says, he absolutely loathes me. Edward said cheerfully. You can't know that, I argued, but then I suddenly wondered if he could. I saw his face. I could tell. How did you see me? I thought you were ditching. I was in my car listening to a CD. It was a normal response, but it surprised Bella, it says. Another person, like, comes into the nurse's office feeling, like, faint. And Edward's like, okay, leave the room right now. And she, like, goes, and he's like, oh my God, you listened to me. And she was like, yeah, I didn't want to see the blood. I already smelled it. And he was like, people can't smell blood. And she said, well, I can. That's what makes me sick. It smells like rusty and salty. So, like, that's what makes her feel sick, is, like, the smell of blood. And he was, like, staring at her with an unfathomable expression. And she's like, what? And he's like, it's nothing. Shifty eyes here. So, like, then Mike comes into the office because he brought that other kid there. And
do you think Mike, okay, this is probably not confirmed in the book or denied, but do you think Mike made another kid pass out just so he could come to the
Yes,
office?
100%.
Okay.
So then he's like, you look better. And she's like, well, just keep your hand in your pocket still. And he's like, are you coming back to class? And she's like, are you kidding? I'd literally have to turn around and come right back. Like, you dumbass bitch. Like, I'm literally gonna have to turn back and come around. And he's like, yeah, I guess. So anyways, are you going to the thing this weekend, to the beach? And she's like, sure, I said I was in. And he's like, we're meeting at my dad's store at 10. Like, so like all of their friend group is going to the beach.
Wait, didn't they talk about that a long time ago?
I think so. Probably.
Maybe she was talking about a different event, but I thought when she met Jessica, she like invited her to it.
Yeah, so yeah, I think so.
But then like it's the winter and now it's the spring.
But their winter is different. Isn't it? In Portland, it's different. It's not like as cold as it is here.
I know, but
not Portland. I'm generalizing.
It went from snow to go Oregon to the beach.
It's spring now. It was like a month. Like it was like probably like February-ish, and now it's like March-ish.
Okay, but imagine.
But you're thinking of the beach as like this warm beach. They're not going to like a warm beach.
I know, but imagine you were hanging out with somebody and they were like, hey, in like 2.5 to 3 months, do you want to go to the beach?
I don't think it was then. I think it was earlier and I skipped over it.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
No, I just was confused.
Anyways, so he like finally gets confirmation that she's going, and he's very delighted that she says so because they're in front of Edward, and she's saying that she's going. So then she like realizes that she has to go to gym next, and then Edward gets her out of going to gym by like having her look pale in the corner, and is like, I'm just gonna take her home instead. Like, I'm gonna take Bella home, nurse. She looks so sick still.
And the nurse is like,
yeah,
whatever you say, master. I mean, sure, Edward.
No.
Tara doesn't like my theory.
She says Bella has gym next hour. He says Bella has gym next hour, and I don't think she feels well enough. Actually, I was thinking I should take her home now. Do you think you could excuse her from class? His voice was like melting honey. I can imagine how much more overwhelming his eyes would be. Do you need to be excused too, Edward? Miss Cope fluttered. Why wouldn't I do that? Why couldn't I do that? Bella says. No, I have Mrs. Goff. She won't mind. Okay, it's all taken care of. You feel better, Bella, she called to me. So he gets her out of the class, and they're walking because he asks if he has to carry her, and she's like, no.
Because that would be too embarrassing.
Yeah, exactly. She's literally like, God, that's so embarrassing. So she says, so are you going this Saturday, I mean? And he says, where are you guys going exactly? And she said, down to La Push to First Beach. And he says, I don't really think I was invited. She's like, well, I'm inviting you. So she's like inviting him to the beach trip. He says, let's you and I not push poor Mike any further this week. We don't want him to snap. His eyes danced. He was enjoying the idea more than he should. Mike Schmike, I muttered. Preoccupied by the way he'd said you and I liked it more than I should. Yeah, she said Mike Schmike. That's right.
How dare she? I'm a nice boy. Don't Mike Schmike me.
And then she's like, okay, well, now I'm leaving. And he's like, where do you think you're going? And she's like, well, I'm going home. And he's like, in your condition? No way. Like, I'm driving you. He wants to drive her.
But how's she going to get her car back?
I know. She said, she says, what condition? And what about my truck? And he says, I'll have Alice drop it off after school. And he basically like drags her along to his Volvo or whatever. And she's like, I'm perfectly capable of driving myself home. And he's basically just like, get in, Bella. Get in. Yeah, so maybe he is manipulating her. I don't know.
That's what I'm saying.
She's like contemplating her chances of reaching her truck before him catching her, and he says, I'll just drag you back, guessing her plan. And
because he can read her mind.
She's like, this is completely unnecessary. And then they're like in the car, and it's like playing a song that she knows. It's Claire de Lune, which is a Debussy song. It's like classical music.
Mm-hmm. I know what Claire de Lune is.
Oh, sorry, I don't know.
It's okay.
And he's like surprised that she knows it, and she's like, oh, my mother plays like a lot of classical music around my house, so like they're connecting over something. OMG, they're connecting. She's like, I only know my favorite songs, and he's like, oh, this is one of my favorite songs. Like, oh my god,
Claire de Lune.
Oh my god. So now they're like driving along, and he's like, so what's your mom like, or like what's your mother like? And they're like having like a real conversation, and she's like goes on to describe her mom, and she's like, she looks a lot like me, but she's prettier. I have too much of Charlie in me. She's more outgoing than I am and braver. She's irresponsible and slightly eccentric, and she's a very unpredictable cook. She's my best friend. And she stops because it's making her sad. Like,
right.
And he goes, how old are you, Bella? And she says, I'm 17. And he says, you don't seem 17. And she goes, I'm quirky. I'm different than other girls. She says, my mom always says I was born 35 years old and then I get more middle-aged every year. Well, someone has to be the adult. So she's like, I'm different. I'm like older.
I'm like an old soul.
Yeah, I'm like an old soul. She says, well, you don't seem like a junior in high school yourself. And he changes the subject. So
wait, how old is he?
I guess we'll find out later. So he says, so why did your mother marry Phil? And she's like surprised that he remembers her stepdad's name because she mentioned it once, like 2 months ago when they first were talking. She's like, well, my mother, she's very young for her age. I think Phil makes her feel even younger. And at any rate, she's crazy about him. And she's like, he's like, do you approve? And she's like, does it matter? I just want her to be happy. And he's like, well, that's very generous. He's like, well, I wonder. And she's like, wonder what? Would she extend the same courtesy to you, do you think? No matter who your choice was?
Even if he was a vampire.
And she says, I think so, but she's the parent after all. It's a little bit different. And he says, no one too scary then. He teases. I grinned in response. What do you mean by scary? Multiple facial piercings and extensive tattoos? That's one definition, I suppose, he says. What's your definition? But he ignores my question and asks me another. Do you think that I could be scary? He raised one eyebrow and the faint trace of a smile lightens his face. And then she's like, I think you could be if you wanted to. And he says, are you frightened of me now? And she says, no. She's like trying to like distract him. So she's like, are you going to tell me about your family now? I feel like it's a much more interesting story. And he's like, well, what do you want to know? Like he's kind of like guarded a little bit.
Right.
And she said, well, the Cullens adopted you. And he's like, yeah. And what happened to your parents? They died many years ago. And she's like, I'm sorry. And he's like, I don't remember them that clearly. Carlisle and Esme have been my parents for a long time now. And you love them. It wasn't a question. It was obvious in the way he spoke about them. Yes, he smiled. I couldn't imagine two better people. She's like asking other questions. And my brother and sister and Jasper and Rosalie, for that matter, are actually going to be quite upset if they have to stand in the rain waiting for me because he like drove her home and he drove them to school. And she's like, oh, sorry, I guess you gotta go. And he's like, well, you probably want your truck back before Chief Swan gets home too, huh? So you don't have to tell him about the biology incident, like the fainting incident. And she's like, yeah, well, he's probably already heard because there's no secrets in this small ass town, basically. And he says, have fun at the beach. Good weather for sunbathing as it's like raining. And he's like, she's like, won't I see you tomorrow? And he's like, no, Emmett and I are like going away for the weekend. And she says, what are you going to do? And he says, we're going to be hiking in the Goat Rocks wilderness just south of Rainier. And she remembers that Charlie had said that they go camping all the time.
Mm-hmm. Pretty much every weekend is what Charlie said.
Right. And she goes, well, have fun. And she's like trying to sound enthusiastic. And he's like, will you do something for me this weekend? He turned to look me straight in the face, utilizing the full power of his burning gold eyes. I nodded helplessly. Don't be offended, but you seem to be one of those people who just attract accidents like a magnet. So try not to fall into the ocean or get run over or anything, all right? He smiled crookedly. The helplessness had faded as he spoke. I glared at him. I'll see what I can do, I snapped as I jumped out into the rain. I slammed the door behind me with excessive force. He was still smiling as he drove away. That's the end of the chapter.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. Lots of crazy stuff.
So he somehow knows what the lesson plan of the class is going to be.
Mm-hmm.
So he doesn't show up because I've been guaranteeing all that blood.
That would be a little
make a guy
crazy.
like him a little crazy.
Yeah.
And then, so he just goes and chills in his car. He's not going to be at the school on what I assume is Friday because he's just going to leave.
Yeah, I think
so
it's
this guy kind of gets away with whatever he wants.
Yeah, he does. He does. He's just so dazzling and beautiful.
Mike got simped hard again.
Yeah, he sure did. He always is, And
we just kind of
he's always the underdog simping.
We kind of get some relationship building with them.
Yeah.
But otherwise, not a whole lot happened in this chapter.
No, not a lot. I mean, the biggest part of it all is that, they were doing the blood typing and he wasn't there, really.
Right. It was like, if you weren't sure that this guy's a frickin' vampire.
Right.
You're
like,
definitely
you
sure
gotta
now.
know by now.
I'm surprised Bella doesn't know by now.
Right.
Has he walked in front of any mirrors in front of anybody?
I'm not sure about that. Guess we'll see.
Because you wouldn't be able to see him. Has anybody driven a wooden stake through his heart?
No, but I think vampires in this world are different than the vampires that we know previously.
Who's to say? Who knows?
Who's to say, I guess.
Who knows? Anyway, Tara, thank you for coaching me. I always say it too early because we also want to say thank you to everybody for listening and watching.
Yes.
And thank you for all your fun comments and interaction. And we will see you guys next week.
With Chapter 6.
Chapter 6. Tara, thank you for coaching me.
You're welcome. Bye.
Bye.